Number 10. Harley Quinn. There was a time when Harley Quinn in the comics ended up being recruited by Granny Goodness of Apocalypse. She would end up going with her to Apocalypse and even end up being convinced by her to join her team of female Furies, who are effectively new gods. This only ended up being a thing for a few issues, but gave Harley a pretty rad new look and a hammer. During her time as a Fury, she took up the name Hammer Harleen. Because the female Furies are considered new gods, this technically made Harley Quinn a god, temporarily. The whole reason that she ended up joining in the comics was because she was on vacation and looking to take a break from her life, a bit of a escapism if you will, which this new cosmic role provided in spades. I mean, it's a pretty cool vacation if you get to just be a female Fury for a little while, right? However, eventually it was time for Harley to return to her life, and so she had to fight her way off the team in the end, because, you know, people don't really leave the female Furies peacefully. Also, I'm pretty sure she was not a great female Fury. We also see her time as a female Fury hinted at in season 2 of the Harley Quinn animated series. Number 9. Korvac. Michael Korvac was a villain from the future who sought more power and influence, traveling back in time and becoming godlike in terms of his power levels when he managed to take on some of the power cosmic. Pretty sweet. His newly founded powers and the way he used them eventually attracted the attention of the Avengers, who he managed to defeat with the help of his romantic partner, Karina Tivan, daughter of the Collector, a name that was actually also given to the Collector's servant in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. She was named Karina, though I imagine she was not meant to be a stand-in for his daughter, so if you saw her and you were like, is that his daughter? Probably not. She was the one that got all like explodey when she touched the Infinity Gem. Not a good look. However, in the comics, in the end, Karina came to lose faith in Korvac, and it was because of this that he decided to take his own life and undo what he had done, using his powers to bring back the fallen Avengers. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you are loving it as much as I am loving it, be sure to show us some love by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Blackheart. Blackheart is the son of Mephisto, who would eventually seek to overthrow his father and become a ruler of a portion of hell. Just a portion. Not only was he basically born into godhood, but he also worked hard to earn it for himself, or he at least worked hard to employ other people to help him in earning it for himself. So, didn't really earn it for himself, I guess. Mephisto created Blackheart out of all the evil energy gathered from centuries of misdeeds committed on a hill in New York called Christ's Crown. Blackheart would eventually build a town around Christ's Crown that he would rule, but after being defeated by Wolverine, the Punisher, and Ghost Rider, he would recruit them to help him overthrow his father. Also, Wolverine, the Punisher, and Ghost Rider is like a pretty OP like gang of heroes, I think. Number 7. Savitar. Savitar's name literally means god of motion in Hindu, so it's no surprise that this villain is considered a god to some. He basically became a speed god, even going so far as to create a kind of religion, or at the very least I think we can call it a cult, surrounding him. He gathered followers and became known as their leader. Even in his absence, his cult, known as the Thunderbolt Agents at the time, flourished and grew, even without him. That's how powerful Savitar's beliefs are. Or believing in Savitar is, I guess. Savitar is also known for being an enemy of the Flash, and in the CW verse is literally the evil version of Barry Allen from an alternate timeline. But in the comics, not so much. In the comics, I think we still don't know who he is, actually. And I feel like that's been a thing forever, and is still a thing now, even in Prime Earth continuity. Who is Savitar? We don't know. Number 6. Apocalypse. Apocalypse became a god very briefly during the Otherworld tournament of Ten of Swords. Of course, some may see him as a godlike being all the time, but at this moment he truly was a god, just as his wife had been before him. Though here, Apocalypse was also able to show his strength and resilient will off, separate from the godlike power that he attained. Near the end of the tournament, an all-out war broke out when Apocalypse, after winning the battle against Genesis, refused to kill her. Annihilation took over Genesis, causing a war between all involved, including the Amenthi demons. However, Apocalypse would manage to wrench free the golden mask of annihilation from Genesis, sundering their connection. As such, the mask would then possess him, but Apocalypse's will was strong, and he was able to resist the temptation of its power. He simply used it to make the Amenthi stand down, causing a ceasefire basically. Saturnine would then remove the mask from Apocalypse and turn it into a staff, ba-boom, with her magics, making it much less of an influential artifact from there on out. I feel like you know you're powerful if you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna wear a mask that turns me into a god and be able to be like, I don't really want to be influenced by you, so I'm just not gonna do that. Like, that's power. Number 5. Thanos. Thanos has been godlike many times, including the Infinity Gauntlet story, but he also basically became a god in an alternate future where he had succeeded in wiping out almost all life in the universe, in the Thanos Wins story arc. Only a few opponents were left standing there, including himself. He had killed everyone in order to be with death, and had his herald, Cosmic Ghost Rider, go to retrieve his past self to help him with one final task: to take out the great and older version of Thanos himself, King Thanos, if you will. This would thereby allow him to be with death, but the older version of Thanos himself needed help to do the deed. He was like, I can't take my own life. I need some help here. Help me out. However, younger Thanos was over his love of death at the time and saw this older version as being weak for asking for help, despite the fact that he was so successful and terrifying in his own reality. Also, Thanos, I feel like asking for help does not make you weak. That's just my opinion, but hey. Younger Thanos decided to leave his older self alone, returning to his own reality and refusing to become him, thereby denying this older King Thanos' very existence. So, he was a god, but now he's gone. Bye! Number 4. Joker. There was a time in the comics when the Joker ended up getting 99.9% of Mr. Mixie's Pitilix power. Mr. Mixie had only intended to give him 0.01%, but was tricked into doing just the opposite, because ain't that just how it goes. With this level of power, Joker ruled as a god. He did all sorts of wacky and awful things. He ate all of China, put Superman in an insane asylum, and tormented and tortured Batman daily, killing him on repeat, but basically always bringing him back to life. He was defeated though and lost his power when it was acknowledged that without Batman the Joker was nothing, and he simply couldn't exist without the hero, which was why he had never killed him permanently with his newfound power. This weakness ended up being his downfall. Number 3. Gorr the God Butcher. Gorr the God Butcher reveals himself to have become a god through permanently bonding and integrating with the All Black on the alternate Earth of 14412, a future where Thor becomes King Thor. So many kings on my list. Gorr, in transferring his own consciousness into the Necrosword and thereby bonding permanently with the All Black, has become an eternal being incapable of dying. Gorr had basically become one with the universe. He would still end up being subdued, but it would require him unleashing the god Tempest from within Mjolnir to do so. And even then, this version of him wasn't technically dead, just rendered powerless and pretty permanently incapacitated. But still, I don't think he killed him there. Number 2. Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy was, I suppose, more of a ruler than a god, but she definitely appeared godlike in terms of her powers during the Everyone Loves Ivy arc of Tom King's Batman. She also did a pretty good job, I think, of controlling everything, which is why I put her so high up on my list. Also, I just like Poison Ivy, so come at me. You don't like Poison Ivy? Let's fight in the comments. No, I'm kidding. Let's not fight. Let's just love each other and love our differences. In this story, Ivy finds a way to control the world's population through the greens that they consume. Only a few manage to evade her influence, but overall the world seems to be even better with Ivy ruling it, to be honest. However, taking away people's free will in exchange for turning them into a happy collective is pretty frowned upon by the heroes who do remain. Batman finds a way to free Harley Quinn from Poison Ivy's influence, hoping that she might be able to resolve this issue more peacefully, or just, resolve it at all, as both Batman and Catwoman are a bit at a loss as to what to do, considering how powerful Ivy is at this point. Harley manages to talk Pamela down, and in the end, Poison Ivy gives up her control willingly. But also, how cool would it be if Ivy just continued to rule the world, and that was DC now, and that was just how it went forever? I personally would read that comic book. I think it'd be great. Number 1. Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom ended up becoming a god during the recreation of Battleworld. When the incursions happened, he was the one to stand up and take on the power of Molecule Man in order to try and save the multiverse. He wasn't a great god in this new world, but hey, he did his best, stitching together all the alternate worlds with the Earth of 616 to save each in creating a patchwork-like interconnected reality where each alternate Earth basically became like a province or a territory in this new battle world, which God Emperor Doom himself ruled over. In the end, Doom was convinced to give up his power in order to make things right, and turn the universe back into something similar to what it had been previously. He would pass on Molecule Man's power to Reed Richards, who in turn would alter reality so that Doom's face would be healed again, and so that Doom would believe the Fantastic Four were no more, which allowed him to finally be happy, ending the story with a big Dr. Doom smile. How lovely. I love a happy ending. Number 10. Black Hand. The Black Hand is William Hand, a notable Green Lantern villain. His backstory was actually retconned to make him better fit in the events of the Blackest Night story arc. In that story, he is also a Green Lantern villain, but one who is obsessed with death. He works at his family's funeral home and is an implied necrophiliac. Ugh. He ends up killing his family after death calls to him, urging him to destroy the superheroes who have thwarted both William and death itself by living. After killing his family, he commits suicide and is rewarded with the first Black Lantern ring. I like that I just don't explain why he killed his family, but you know, when death whispers to you. This ring and his new role as a Black Lantern helped him to cast the spell Raise Dead by granting others Black Lantern rings and adding their strength to that of the Black Lantern Corps. Eventually, the Black Lanterns killed enough to then give Black Hand the power to summon the Guardian of Death, Nekron, who went on to threaten the very existence of all heroes on Earth. However, when Green Lantern uses the white light of creation, Black Hand is forcefully resurrected, breaking his ties to the Black Lantern Corps and to Nekron, who was using Black Hand as a link to the realm of the living. Wah wah wah. Defeated. Number 9. Carnage. Carnage had appeared to die in the comics after slamming back down into the Earth and burning up in orbit after being discarded by an alternate symbiotic-obsessed alien race known as the Poisons. Though Cletus appeared deceased after this trip, despite his symbiote's hearty attempts to keep its host alive, he found himself revived by the hands of a Null worshipping cult. Beyond that, he also found himself momentarily connected to Null, granting him even more strength than he once had. He set out to collect all of the codexes of those who had ever bonded with the symbiote, stored in their spines, apparently, to help free the god Null. Every time he consumes a codex, he appears to get stronger, allowing him to eventually regain the Grendel symbiote's godlike powers. Like a godlike Carnage is so scary, so terrifying. Number 8. Poison Ivy. In the Everyone Loves Ivy story arc, Poison Ivy ends up finding a way to take over the world. Being one of the more relatable villains, she argues that she is working to do so in order to protect the world and humanity with it. The way she looks at it, humanity left to their own devices would destroy everything. Batman finds out about this motive after he and Selina Kyle get free of her control and discover the Poison Ivy is controlling everyone through their consumption of vegetables. Dun dun dun. Which has allowed her to infiltrate the entire world's mind, because you know, she controls vegetables, then you eat them, then she controls you. While this doesn't make her a god on a universal scale, on a more local and somewhat biblical scale, this could be considered a godhood. She does eventually decide to relinquish the control of the planet, but not because Batman and Catwoman beat her. She's like unbeatable right now. She gives it up when they are able to free Harley long enough to have Poison Ivy's best friend and sometimes love interest coax out of Pamela the real motive behind this whole world domination plot, and convince her that she doesn't need to control the world any longer. Harley's there to take care of Ivy, and Ivy can finally rest. Aw, it got cute at the end. Number 7. The Orb. The Orb is a strange Marvel villain who boasts of enhanced senses and an eye for a head. He ended up managing to get his hands on one of Utah's eyes after dreams of the Watcher's base inspired him to rob the Watchers. Eventually, after losing the eye and then regaining it again, he bonded with it, giving him the ability to see as a Watcher does. The Orb, once a second-rate villain, now has godlike omniscience. While he claims to uphold the Watcher's vow of non-interference, he also believes he should be allowed to help along any events, which would simply help others to reach their full potential. That's kind of interference, just FYI. Not limiting this, well, ultimately interference, because that's what it is, to just those with good intentions, but also helping to advance the plots of more insidious individuals, such as murderers. So maybe the Orb shouldn't have that power. Maybe he shouldn't be able to see everything. Seems dangerous. Number 6. Apocalypse. Before Apocalypse was Apocalypse, he was just En-Sabah Nur. Born disfigured, before he was even Nur, he was simply a small baby, abandoned and left to die. Aw, poor little baby. Fortunately, Baal of the Crimson Sands, a raider, found him and decided to raise him as his own. He gave him the name En-Sabah Nur. Nur gained much strength and wit already just as a normal child, simply from training, but he wasn't quite at god level yet. He wouldn't really gain much power until his mutant abilities surfaced, after his adoptive father died, leaving his son with a prophecy to fulfill. Baal believed that Nur was destined to be a great conqueror and defeat Pharaoh Rama-Tut, who was in actuality time-traveling Kang. Nur came after Tut, aka Kang, and defeated him, Kang escaping through time travel, because that's how he do. During his battle, Nur would have died, but his mutation activated, making him immortal and saving him. He would go on to receive telepathic communication from the Celestials and discover an alien spaceship that would make him even stronger than before, and allow him to become the godlike being that we know him to be today, as we know him, Apocalypse. A dude who literally modified and forced other mutants into becoming his deity-like horsemen. You know you're a god when you literally are creating other little gods. That's a whole thing. Number 5. Kratos. That's right, for this one we are turning to the video game God of War. It's not a comic book, but hey, supervillains don't just exist in comics. And you know me, I like to sprinkle in some different nerd content every now and then. Sneak something a little different in for you, keep you on your toes, little anime, little video games, little pop culture. Now fans of the God of War video game saga may argue that Kratos is not a supervillain though, he's an anti-hero. And while at this point in time in the new God of War with his son Atreus, I would agree with you. But he used to be a really terrible dude, whose actions were often more self-serving, which honestly makes him sometimes even worse than some of the supervillains on this list, who at least appear to be working toward their own twisted greater good at least. I mean, Poison Ivy, she just thinks she's helping, so. It was his obsession with power and lust for war that led him to become Ares' ward, and ended up being his own undoing. This sets him on a path for vengeance, but even then his path of vengeance is also kind of self-serving. He only goes after Ares because Athena promises that the death of his family by his own hands, which Ares tricked him into doing, and all of his other sins will be absolved if he kills Ares. And Kratos believes that this also means that they will be forgotten and he will no longer be haunted by the memories of his family's death. Yet when he does kill Ares, Athena reveals that his sins are forgiven but can never be forgotten. JK lol. Basically, his selfish attitude makes him a misguided villain for most of the games, who becomes imbued with god powers before eventually turning on the gods and the titans, and then just unleashing a bunch of plagues on humanity. So yeah. Number 4. Galactus. Following the path of Apocalypse, Galactus before he went god mode was a simple space explorer named Galen, who ended up sort of giving up on his mission and killing a bunch of people. While he wasn't inherently evil before his ascension, he also wasn't really an inherently evil godlike being even after getting his powers. So Galactus is a supervillain simply because of the fact that he is just such a large threat. But ultimately, he's just a really hungry dude. He's not really evil, he's just hungry. As Galen, he was tasked with saving one of the last surviving worlds, his homeworld of Ta. However, Galen tried to solve the problem, but ultimately he just gave up, thinking the universe was simply at its end, and therefore there was nothing that could be done. He encouraged the last survivors to fly into the center of all that chaos where the energy and matter was gravitating towards, a radioactive ball known as the Cosmic Egg, and just get it all over with. He joined them in the ship and they all sailed into the center of the Cosmic Egg, dying because radioactive. Except that Galen somehow survived and was chosen to be reborn. He was revitalized and merged with the cosmic entity known as the Sixth Infinity, the sentience of the multiverse. This transformed Galen into Galactus, who was so powerful and eventually had lived so long that he needed to devour worlds in order to survive. Harsh deal, bud. Number 3. Brainiac. In the Justice League Unlimited animated series in the episode Divided We Fall, Brainiac goes God mode after deciding to fully merge with Lex Luthor. Brainiac's goal is to record all information ever known and destroy the original source material for that information. I know, that doesn't sound that bad, until you realize that you are going to be recorded and deleted yourself, which is not so great. Lex adds to this plan his own imagination, feeling that Brainiac is limited by his programming. His goal is to reshape the universe in their own image after accruing all information. The two almost succeed, creating androids of the Justice Lords to stop the Justice League. Unfortunately, they ended up defeated when the Flash uses the Speed Force to separate them, and almost phases out of existence as a result. Wally, don't go. Number 2. Surtur. In the MCU, Surtur goes from being godlike to dead to just being godlike again. Odin successfully banished him and the rest of his race to Muspelheim, after defeating Surtur and separating him from his power source, the Eternal Flame. But there is a prophecy that Surtur will bring about the end of Asgard through the event known as Ragnarok, wherein Asgard's empire was fated to fall and be destroyed. To prevent Surtur from rising up again, Thor defeats him, but foolishly keeps his remains, or I guess his skull, really, in Odin's vault, where the Eternal Flame is also kept, which really seems like a little too close for comfort to me, but it comes in handy when Loki needs to evoke Ragnarok in order to defeat Hela, by dropping Surtur's remains into the Eternal Flame and resurrecting Surtur, who is now bigger and stronger than ever. While Hela is the goddess of death, she appears no match for Surtur, the god of I guess, being big and on fire. That's his thing. Number 1. Nebula. What we often tend to forget when it comes to the Infinity Gauntlet storyline was that it wasn't just Thanos that managed to wield the gauntlet. There was a villain, actually far worse than him, who stole it from him before being stopped. Nebula. Nebula, who was basically a corpse at this point after almost being completely obliterated by Thanos, a story for another time, managed to get the gauntlet off her supposed grandfather. Once again, a story for another time. Following in her grandfather's footsteps, she goes all mad and decides instead of just getting revenge on Thanos, she should rule the world with the gauntlet. This causes Adam and Thanos to team up and take her down, thus ending her godhood with the gauntlet.
In at number 10, we have Darkseid. Darkseid has always had a whole lot of power. First introduced in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen issue 134 in 1970, and later properly introduced in 1971's Forever People issue 1, the first was a cameo. Darkseid is the tyrannical leader of the planet Apokolips. His goal is to conquer the universe and eliminate all free will and reshape the universe into his own image. Yeah, pretty darn evil. It doesn't help that at his base level he's one of the strongest beings in the DC universe. So when he became even stronger in the 2005 Mr. Miracle series after attaining the anti-life equation, an equation that allows its user to completely control the thoughts and emotions of all living beings in the universe, yikes, you can imagine how freaked out many superheroes were about it. He used it to destroy the Fourth World, and during Final Crisis he began to take over Earth and corrupt the multiverse. Luckily, Batman sacrificed himself to fatally wound Darkseid, and the Justice League managed to finish him off. Moving on to number 9, Onslaught. Onslaught may be part of a less than favorable story event that typically gets criticized by fans, but the amount of power this character has is absolutely undeniable. Onslaught is the darkest parts of Charles Xavier's subconscious merged with the darkest parts of Magneto's mind, coming together to create a separate persona who has complete psychic omnipotence. This was a product of a battle between the X-Men and Magneto's acolytes, with Xavier using his telepathic abilities to shut down Magneto's mind and render him catatonic. Because of that, those two dark aspects of both men merged and Onslaught was born. He would terrorize the entire Marvel 616 universe, with the Avengers and the Fantastic Four having to sacrifice themselves in order to put an end to him. Although they were resurrected thanks to Franklin Richards, who made sure they were reborn in a pocket universe he created. That's a whole other can of worms for another video. And at number 8, Granny Goodness. Aside from some excellent alliteration that makes it sound like this character deserves to be on the Golden Girls, Granny Goodness, who first appeared in 1971's Mr. Miracle Volume 1 Issue 2, was not always a new god. She began her life as a lowly, which is the term for the brutally oppressed, impoverished class of people on the planet of Apokolips. Once she was young, she was taken away from her parents and forced to train as one of Darkseid's hounds, a group of elite soldiers. Now, she impressed Darkseid so much during this time that he had her run the training facility for his soldiers, utilizing techniques like brainwashing and torture in what can only be deemed as a brutal parody of childcare. She often runs orphanages for Darkseid as well. After completing her training, she became a new god, now endowed with immortality, superhuman physical attributes, along with becoming a skilled warrior, leader, and tactician. She also wields a mega rod and a bunch of advanced technology. And, fun fact, Jack Kirby, her creator, modeled her after Phyllis Diller. And at number 7, Thane. Thane was not always a supervillain. He just had the unfortunate luck of being Thanos' son. We know how well being one of Thanos' kids turned out for Gamora. During Thanos' galactic conquest, the Mad Titan fathered many children. During the 2013 Infinity story arc, Thanos decides to invade Earth after learning that most of the Avengers are off-planet. Now, at the time, he targets the home of the Inhumans, saying that he'll spare the rest of the Inhumans in exchange for the deaths of all Inhumans between the age of 16 and 22. Now, the real intention of this invasion was to locate his lost son, Thane, and kill him. Now, Thane just thinks he's a regular old dude until the Terrigen Mists are released and his dormant powers awaken. Powers strong enough to one day give his papa a run for his money. That's why Thanos wants the kid killed off. But one of Thanos' Black Order, Ebony Maw, betrays him and ends up finding Thane first, turning him against his father, which results in the eternal Inhuman hybrid trapping his daddy dearest in a pocket limbo stasis. And at number 6, Lex Luthor. For a mortal man, Lex Luthor has more than proved himself capable of going up against some of the strongest individuals kicking around the DC universe. His genius-level intellect has allowed for him to rule over Metropolis, so to speak, with only the Dark Knight's Wayne Industries being the only true competitor for how far and wide LexCorp's reaches. Now, during the Darkseid War, a lot of characters in the DC universe got to dabble in being a deity, and Lex was one of them. In Justice League Volume 2, Issue 45, Lex benefits from another DC big bad dying. Darkseid bites the dust, and his his Omega effect ends up being contained inside of Lex, which turns the bald bad guy into the god of Apocalypse, getting to choose whether he would free Apocalypse from tyranny or become a tyrant himself. In at number 5, the Magus. Adam Warlock may seem like one of the most noble heroes out there in the Marvel Universe, and sure, he kind of is, but the character actually has an evil half named the Magus. Over the years, we've seen 3 incarnations of this evil dude. The first was an older godlike Magus from a potential future timeline that Adam encountered, who was the leader of a religious empire known as the Universal Church of Truth. Long story short, Church of Truth was not a good church or religion. It was pretty bad and evil. This Magus was a tyrant, and in order to prevent him from existing, Warlock actually works with his foe Thanos in order to ensure that this Magus timeline is erased. But that was not the end of the Magus. After Warlock had acquired the Infinity Gauntlet, his soul expelled 2 halves, one good, one evil, and accidentally gives those halves corporeal forms. And guess what? The evil half names himself the Magus, and then tries to get the gauntlet for himself. Warlock then would become Magus later on after repairing damage to the space-time continuum and ended up dying. But the Magus is resurrected as a child later, and also Warlock is resurrected because death in comics doesn't really exist. Up next at 4, Molecule Man. Molecule Man Owen Reese first debuted in Fantastic Four issue 20 in 1963, but it wasn't until the character's later years in the comics that his full range of power would become apparent to others in the superhero and villain community. Capable of reality warping and molecular manipulation on a multiversal level, Molecule Man, previously a villain and sometimes a reluctant hero, is very, very powerful, and nothing like his involvement in the 2015 Secret Wars event goes to show that better. During that series, he began to overcome the subconsciously imposed mental blocks he had placed on himself to prevent him from affecting organic molecules. He would extract the Beyonder from Cosmos and battle him over 3 spatial dimensions, which threatened to cause a multi-universal scale of destruction. Fun! According to Dr. Doom and Reed Richards, he is a multiversal composite entity, a single creature that manifests fractions of its entire being in each universe within the Marvel multiverse. Plus, he was also created by the Beyonders to serve as a living bomb. He will destroy the universe that he's living in if he dies, so that is also fun. So much power, but so much death. Moving on to number 3, we have the Joker. Here we have an occasion where the Joker became a god, and it wasn't even in a Batman story. In Superman issue 160, the Joker ends up tricking Mr. Mxyzptlk into giving him 99.9% of his reality-altering abilities. Now when this happens, the Joker becomes practically omnipotent. And what does a borderline Joker god do? Well, for starters, he calls himself Emperor Joker. Then he shapes the world into one of his own image, which means it is a batshit crazy hell on earth. This all goes down within 69 seconds of the Joker having this power. He entertains himself by killing Lex Luthor over and over and over again, and then he ate the entire population of China just for shits and giggles. As one does. And what about Batman? Well, he tortured him daily only to bring him back to life and do it all over again every single day, taking extra pride in these killings thanks to their very messed up relationship with one another. Luckily, Superman manages to evade the Joker for a bit, reaches out to the weakened Mxyzptlk and the Spectre, and they all realize that the Joker's weakness, even after getting all this power, is still Batman. They use that bond against him to depower him, and everything is back to normal. And I guess all of China was regurgitated. And at number 2, Dr. Doom. Doom has become a god twice over the years, and both times were during the Secret Wars story events. Now the first Secret Wars, which took place in 1984 and 1985, was a 12-issue crossover limited series in which the cosmic entity known as the Beyonder teleports heroes and villains from the Marvel Universe to a place he created called Battleworld, where they're meant to duke it out in a contest that became a beloved story arc ever since, and was also a brilliant way to sell a bunch of toys, if we're being honest. Now during all of this, Dr. Doom managed to harness the power cosmic, gaining godlike power in an attempt to defeat the Beyonder. The sequel, which occurred almost a year after the original, would explain how Doom was alive in the current timeline. Then, let's flash forward to 2015, another Secret Wars was created, which positioned Doom as a survivor of a cataclysmic event in the multiverse, and he became God Emperor Doom, fully omnipotent. He had built his own battle world and used Molecule Man to empower himself. And last but not least, in at number 1, Thanos. Thanos didn't want to become a god for the sake of being a god. He wanted to become a god in order to prove himself worthy to his one true love, Lady Death, the entity and physical manifestation of death itself. After Thanos had successfully acquired all of the Infinity Gems and had placed them into the Gauntlet, the Mad Titan spent some of the very first panels of the Infinity Gauntlet comic story by literally creating a giant rock structure in space that spells out the word God in capital letters. Not even making this up. Meanwhile, Mephisto, who's like, yeah, I'm gonna side with him and not get dead and try to take advantage of his obvious insecurities, is tooting Thanos' horn by telling him he's in awe of being in Thanos' divine presence. And then, after building himself a very bougie base in space, Thanos commits the ultimate abuse of power. He snaps his fingers, wiping out half of all living beings in the entire universe, all to show Death just how much he loves her. Still, she rejects him, even after he manages to slaughter all of the remaining heroes and cosmic entities who join up with Adam Warlock to take him on. Ouch. In the end, it's his own self-doubt, insecurities, and his misjudgment of Nebula that bring his reign of terror to an end. And his goddom. Even though he's still pretty powerful.